Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. My name is Josh Norris. His name is John Daigle. And that guy's name is Ian Hartitz. Gentlemen, we're here. More football. How are we?
I feel like we just had an hour-long conversation off air, and now we have to start a podcast.
You felt like it because that's what happened.
Yeah.
That will be a later episode for all of our subscribers that they can check out.
We are not releasing anything that was just said. We're never talking about that again.
Ian, we are coming off a fantastic weekend of football with maybe even, hopefully, a better one coming up. Before we get to those game previews, do you want to hit on a lot of coaching news that has happened in the last few days? As we talked about on the Monday episode, Mike McCarthy has been hired by the Dallas Cowboys. Not fired. That would have been a quick turnaround, even, especially for Jerry Jones. But two new head coaches have entered the NFL. One is Matt Rhule to the Carolina Panthers. One is Joe Judge to the New York Giants. Let's start off with Matt Rhule. Rhule is scheduled to meet with New York Giants, I believe, on Tuesday, but instead the Panthers flew to his home in Waco, Texas. David Tepper put forward a 7-year, $60 million check in front of his face, and boom, he's the head coach of the Carolina Panthers.
$2.5 million signing bonus, which I still don't understand why he gets $2.5 million moving. Is that
probably.
Okay.
You moved here, wasn't there?
I assure you, $2.5 million was not in the contract.
Ian, before I or myself, Daigle, take a little time to talk about this hiring, why don't we get your thoughts on it?
You know, I've never been the biggest follower of college football, especially just during the season. But I mean, just based on, kind of looking at what he's done, being able to bring that program back from kind of just the Art Briles is how ugly that all ended. I mean, I was just seeing how good Baylor was this whole season was kind of surprising to me. And once I look a little closer at the statistics, I mean, I'm assuming he hasn't been getting the same influx of talent that maybe they were getting under Briles. And for them to be that successful, I mean, it just shows that he can at least run a program at a high level, which I think more and more, I'm sure he does have his offensive principles and philosophies that he wants to install and all that. But more and more, I think with the head coach, just get someone that can lead the program and doesn't have their own agenda on offense or defense because, we've seen what Harbaugh, we've seen what the best coaches really this year, just a willingness to mold into the scheme that best fits your players, which shouldn't be that big of an abstract idea, but guys that can do that seem to be the most successful.
The world is full of cynical people. So I was not shocked to see that people were asking what could go wrong whenever they hired and gave so much money to a college coach to rebuild an organization. But I think we should be asking what could go right, because anything could absolutely go wrong. But at least this man has turned around two teams. The Baylor one, as you mentioned, was a huge deal after Art Briles left. It was imagined that organization, that university was going to take decades to get back on the map. Yeah. And he did it.
Some suggested the death penalty.
He did it such a short amount of time. And it sounds like he's just trying to join the band back together. Whenever the Jets tried to hire him before spurning him for Adam Gase, look how that turned out. He did want to bring along Lions QB's coach Sean Ryan. Sounds like he's going to get him back as OC. He's bringing along Phil Snow, Baylor defensive coordinator, to be with him most likely. But more importantly for me, it's that he's bringing the Baylor Recovery and Sports Science program that he instilled, that Tepper probably doesn't know what it is, but being the most important and successful hedge fund capitalist in the world, just being take however many million you want and create this recovery program, because if you believe it works, this is your organization.
Yeah, it's one where, owners, when they acquire players, when they trade players, when they sign players, they have to deal with the salary cap, right? So it's an even playing field for everyone. That's not the case with facilities. It's not the case with creating new programs. And, a lot of people probably raise an eyebrow when a head coach for the first time in the NFL gets a 7-year guaranteed contract. But this is where these owners get to flex their muscles. This is when they get to use whatever funds they want to invest into their team. And we know David Tepper's a 7-time billionaire. So, and I think part of it is also how much these college coaches are getting paid now. He was making, I believe, $6.2 million at Baylor every single year. And yeah, he led them into a top 10 program, and they loved the connection and everything and relationship they had there. But now you have to compete not only with the teams around you, but also with how much college teams are paying as well. What you pointed out, Ian, I think is super important because, process is all talk until coaches really stick to their process. And so many of these teams have difficulty through the highs and namely the lows in sticking to their process. And Matt Rhule is already saying, hey, even when we have losing records, when we have losing seasons, we're going to maintain our identity. And I love everything he's talked about with athletic testing and how they implemented that at Baylor in terms of evaluating and recruiting classes, because that's something to me that's still an edge in the market of talent acquisition that enough teams aren't doing that they can still take advantage of.
He's already got plenty of talent, at least on the offensive skill position spots. I mean, we talked about going in this season, just DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Christian McCaffrey. There are plenty of guys to make this a good transition for Cam Newton as he becomes, a more just pocket quarterback, because he can't do the same things he used to be able to do. And, we would expect that out of any quarterback. So I'm interested to see what this team looks like, because, my first thought with this was like, all right, what's the fantasy impact? And it's hard for me to assume McCaffrey is just a 1.01 now if we're throwing him into a brand new offense. Again, I need to do some more research on the specific Baylor offenses, but I kept seeing running back by committee, running back by committee, running back by committee. Obviously, McCaffrey's going to be the lead dog in Carolina, but if he's not getting that 99% snap roll that he has gotten the last few years under Norv Warner, he's not going to be the same fantasy producer.
And I think it's a turn in the organization, because as we found out with Mike Mayock, when they brought in prospects to visit them in their draft process, we found out quickly Oakland no longer cares about drafting athletes,
right.
Whereas Rule is already putting it in place for athletic testing, so we can slowly pin guys in mock drafts, offensive players for fantasy, to the Panthers once we start getting into that process as well.
And while Marty Hurney is still employed by that organization, I certainly think that Matt Rule is just ahead of him in the pecking order now. And I think we're kind of finding that out more and more across the league, that a lot of these times these head coaches are above general managers, whereas before I think it was inverse. And you mentioned Sean Ryan. We're recording this, by the way, Wednesday at 2:08 p.m. So if anything happens between when you're listening to this and news, that's why we didn't cover it.
Blame us.
But Sean Ryan, Lions quarterbacks coach, has also been the Texans wide receiver and quarterback coach, Giants wide receiver and quarterback coach when Odell Beckham was there. So I have no idea what his offense is going to look like at all.
Former Penn State linebacker.
Was he really?
The guy's he's a real football player.
Let's go on to the Giants hiring, because this was an interesting one. Mentioned that Matt Rule was announced on Monday morning, or was it Tuesday morning?
Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning, excuse me.
Tuesday morning was the insane Giants, Jason Garrett, Matt Rule morning.
And then Joe Judge, 1 hour after Matt Rule was announced as the Giants hiring. Now, this is a name that came out of nowhere. Now, he was mentioned as a interview that the Giants did, but so many people pegged them for Matt Rule. And in fact, Matt Rule, I believe, even had a conversation with the Giants to say, hey, can you match this offer that the Panthers put out? And no one can really match what David Tepper's offering these coaches. But Joe Judge, right now, has been the special teams coach for the New England Patriots, was the wide receivers coach for just 2019. And really, Daigle, probably why they felt like they had to move so quickly is because everyone assumed that he was going to take the Mississippi State head coaching job.
You, the universal you, listening to this podcast right now, have a bad opinion if you believe that he's going to be a bad coach because the Patriots' old wide receivers that couldn't get separation were bad. And then you also have a bad opinion, the universal you listening, if you believe he's going to be a great coach because John Harbaugh was a great coach. It doesn't work out like either of those situations. I don't think he's an X's and O's guy. I think he's more of a leader of men type, which is why they are comically and oddly trying to bring Jason Garrett along, because they envision him as the Wade Phillips to Sean McVay, just a tenured veteran that is supposed to supposedly be an X's and O's guy. But either way, I think that's what they saw in Joe Judge, given the trickle-down coaching tree he stems from.
It's interesting because I think Diggle's onto something. And overall, when we talk about this with this coaching search, like, we can guess how it's going to go, but really we have no idea. Like, right. I remember people making fun of Sean McVay. Frank Reich was like the last hire after Josh McDaniels. Like, these coaches that have been successful, we know nothing about. And more than anything, we don't know anything about anyone in the Patriots organization other than Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was about to say. Like, we see this year after year. Teams try to poach Bill Belichick's assistants. This year, Belichick was their defensive coordinator. So McDaniels, he's out there. He's interviewing for jobs. Mm-hmm. And that leaves Joe Judge pretty much as the next closest guy you could get to getting their next highest up coach. I think the relative success of Brian Flores in Miami had a lot to do with this because, maybe Patricia and Detroit wasn't given the same Belichick assistant vibe. But I don't know. I mean, what was it? Belichick against his assistant coaches is like 1-7 now.
Yeah, and Vrabel tacked on to that.
Vrabel now, Bill O'Brien. We've at least seen glimpses of success. I don't want to give Bill O'Brien too much credit or anything like that, but we've seen Belichick assistants now make their way into the second round of the playoffs. I think teams just, for better or for worse, I don't know enough about Joe Judge to have a super good opinion on him.
I don't think anyone does. Yeah.
Right, and so that's why teams are just taking chances on Belichick assistants.
Just 38 years old. Daigle, could you and I be doing that in 5 or 6 or 7 years?
6 years, give me time.
Okay.
Let's see what happens.
I like that attitude.
I got to get the best ball tiers out first. And after that,
Right,
maybe
best ball tiers lead
maybe I
straight
can be a
into
professional coach after that.
into a head coaching gig. Yeah, and I mentioned that we really don't know anything. We don't know him personally at all. Like, he didn't spend that much time at the forefront of media like some other coordinators do across the league. But we do know that Bill Belichick was basically grooming him to be a head coach and saw something in him in order to do that. And they were having weekly meetings. And, Bill Belichick is such a stickler for special teams and the success of it. And handing that over at the time to like a 35 or 34-year-old Joe Judge, I think is quite telling. But yeah, I mean, people for years have been clamoring for special teams coaches to get head coaching jobs because it's a situation where, as a head coach, you want to be a CEO, you want to be someone that oversees the entire identity and outlook of your team rather than just the offensive coordinator and the play caller. That stands out to me with these two, though, because look, if we run into a case where the Panthers have a fantastic offense, we run into the case where now the Giants have a fantastic offense, well, that offensive coordinator can be poached off the next offseason, the next 2 off seasons to whatever team wants to hire them. So that always is a bit of a question and hesitation I have when your number one man in the organization is not also the one leading the offense like we see in San Francisco and Arizona and so on and so forth.
I do think it's easier to move on from a bad year or two when you have that more figurehead guy at the top. I mean, look at Sean McVay in LA right now. Like, whose fault is it at how bad the Rams offense was this past year? Sean McVay. So especially from the coach's perspective, I think it's a lot easier to have a longer tenure, keep your job when you have these coordinators that really you don't have like combating philosophies inside the organization, which at the very least is usually good.
One more job left, that is the Cleveland Browns, but we'll get to that when that one actually happens. They can take their time now.
They can take their time with me, Daniels, so don't worry.
We cannot take our time. Guys, last weekend, the largest spread was 7.5 in a single game. This week we have 2 games of over 9 points in the spread. Let's go game by game starting on Saturday. But with that said, I mean, it should be a wonderful weekend of football. I expect a lot of close games once again. Let's start off on Saturday. Yes, it's the NBC game. 4:35 Eastern, the Minnesota Vikings travel to the San Francisco 49ers at home. The 49ers are 6.5-point favorites. I mentioned that 7.5-point spread last week. Well, that was the Vikings covering it. Last week we saw the Vikings show just how good they are, how complete they are. And Ian, you've talked about how complete of a team they've been for quite some time.
Yeah, but the problem is I think they're running to maybe the one team that's more complete than them left in the playoffs. I mean, this 49ers team, the only question mark is really at quarterback, especially with expecting to get Quan Alexander, Jaquiski Tartt, and D Ford back this week. That's going to be huge for that defense. But okay, so I have an article up on Rotoworld now. It's just 4 different questions I kind of had about these NFL playoffs as I was going through these. And one was, what happens when the better QB on a worse team faces a worse QB on a better team? Because I think that's what we have here. I mean, Kirk Cousins is better than Jimmy Garoppolo. He has been all season. So we've had 77 matchups like that, and the record is 39-38. I mean, there has been no lean on, which one is superior. Obviously, this is a sample that goes back to 2000. Not every matchup is created equal, but at the very least, I think having a better QB on a worse team can really help bring that team rise to the occasion and get it done. So for me, like seeing the 7-point spread, that's just way too high.
I know they had an easier schedule in those first 8 games, and I'll let Ian talk about that a little more because I know he has them on his notes in front of him. But those first 8 games to me were just so huge. Not only did the Niners have those 3 guys, D Ford, Jaquiski Tartt, and Quan Alexander, healthy for those 8 games. The only games, by the way, their first 8, that they were all 3 healthy for in that span. That's coincidentally not the word I was looking for. That they allowed 11 points per game. Like, there's a reason why they allowed 11 points per game in that half-season stretch.
Yeah.
And so, I just think, given Kirk Cousins' woes under pressure, like this to me, in my mind, just like outmatching the Vikings.
I agree. Ian, it's interesting. We talked about it, and I felt like I talked about it every single week. every single time the 49ers came up on primetime on spotlight games that, look, it doesn't necessarily matter what Jimmy Garoppolo did in the first 6 games, what he did in the first half of the season. And in fact, in the second half of the season, I think he carried the offense when he needed to in points. But every time when it was brought up and when it was apparent, because there were mistakes in basically every game he played, that it matters once you get against these great teams, these very good teams once you reach the playoffs. And how is he going to respond in those moments? And so this entire season, to me, for the 49ers, has obviously been building to this point. And defensively, it's so difficult to have just this unbelievable unit the entire year that consistently disrupts and plays Richard Sherman in the back half and has very good playmakers in the secondary. Yet the offense has been basically very consistent because of Kyle Shanahan being able to scheme people open, because of the running game. Can they do that against Mike Zimmer and this defense? Because Mike Zimmer did a great job against Sean Payton and that offense last week. I think the difference is, Ian, that Saints offense is Jared Cook, Michael Thomas, and Alvin Kamara. We saw Taysom Hill get something, and that's something you can't really game plan for. Meanwhile, I think for the 49ers, if Kyle Shanahan wants to get a player of the football, he's going to get the football.
So the 49ers have been so good all year just creating big plays in the run game and in the pass game. PFF has this cool breakaway percentage metric, just what percentage of running backs' yards come on 15-plus carries. Each of Breida, Coleman, and Mostert in the top 11. So no matter who it is in the backfield, they create big plays there. My big question for this game is, can they get these big chunk plays through the air? Because no, Jimmy Garoppolo hasn't thrown downfield a lot. Actually, league low, 6.5% of his attempts have been 20 yards more downfield. League high, 21 yards per attempt, though, on these deep passes. I mean, we think of, Mahomes, these different guys, the best deep ball quarterbacks, but just in efficiency and with scheme, it has been Garoppolo. I don't think he can hit those this week, though, because I don't think Joe Staley and Mike McGlinchey, who are finally healthy, I don't think they can hold up versus Daniil Hunter and Everson Griffin. I mean, that show they put on last week was incredible. That's really been the case all season. I mean, we talk about these Vikings cornerbacks not being very good. They haven't been. They've all, been graded very lowly by PFF. But with that said, the front seven is so good and so dominant that it's made up for the issues on the back end. So I don't know. Like you say, 49ers, they haven't had these studs to go win the one-on-one matchup. It's been a group effort. But to me, I would like to see a couple more studs that can overcome this, because I think they're going to need some really big individual performances to overcome this pass rush.
And that's the crazy thing, because in that game, the Saints actually went into it all year long having allowed the lowest pressure rate on offense. And then the Vikings front seven comes in and just absolutely dominates them and just traps Drew Brees into the pocket. And he doesn't have time to do anything at all. The difference for me, though, is that if they do somewhat spread it out, I think Mackenzie Alexander's injury in the slot is quite big, because now they're throwing Andrew Sendejo or Holton Hill in there. And as we know, Emmanuel Sanders hasn't played. So Emmanuel Sanders is out snapped Kendrick Bourne over the past month for the Niners, but Kendrick Bourne has actually run more routes from the slot than Emmanuel Sanders. So if they go 3 wide, that would actually be Kendrick Bourne, who hasn't done much this year, but he still has 5 touchdowns on the year. And that's where you can kind of exploit the Vikings in the middle of the field, assuming you have time to throw.
Once again, I just go back to the quarterback play. If Kirk Cousins can make plays against pressure, if they can work that play action passing game, then obviously we've seen the Vikings and Kirk Cousins play great football this year. Meanwhile, we've seen Jimmy Garoppolo, the 49ers as a whole, having great games. And in the second half, he played much better. I think he is 4th in the NFL since week 8 with 20 touchdown passes. Like, he's had his moments as well, but he kind of gives you those roller coaster moments when once you get in the red zone, he might turn the football over, or, turnover luck goes in his favor and a pick six is not completed. That I don't think can happen against a team like the Vikings. 6.5 is quite a number of points, Ian. It sounds like you're leaning towards the Vikings here.
Yeah, and the one thing, I know it comes down to quarterbacks, but with these two teams, it comes down to running backs a lot too, because both these offenses will want to run
Love
the
to
ball
hear it.
no matter what. And look, the 49ers, for all the good things about the 49ers defense this year, they allowed over 100 rushing yards in 12 games. Dalvin Cook is going to get more than 20 touches. I'm not all that convinced the 49ers are going to be able to completely shut them down, even with these guys being back healthy.
So is that your official pick before we move on here?
I am taking the Vikings +7, and I feel great about it.
All right.
I'm taking the Niners point and the points. Actually, I'm laying it with the Niners. There's certainly more intricacy than just dumbing it down to this, but the fact that Dalvin Cook had 84 first half yards, and then 46 in the second half, and then overtime. And now we take that overtime game on Sunday and have a short turnaround to the first kickoff on Saturday. Like, this Vikings team has got to be tired against a team that has now had essentially 14 days to rest. So yeah, I just don't like the Vikings at all on the road.
Yeah, just remember this. I think that Kyle Shanahan is going to make Anthony Barr and Xavier Rhodes' Saturdays just an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
Just an absolute nightmare.
We'll see if Jimmy G can make that happen.
We'll see that. All right, next up, Tennessee Titans go to the Baltimore Ravens. 48 total in this game. 9.5-point favorites, the Ravens are. This is 8:15 Eastern on Saturday. Daigle, it felt like the Titans last week dominated in many ways. Yes, they beat the Patriots, 19-13. Only scored 14 points, though, offensively. And that's what I keep going back to. I have this mindset, once again, that this was a great performance by the Titans offensively and even defensively. Yet they only put up basically 14 points on one side of the ball. So is that going to be enough to beat this Ravens team, which was clearly the best team in the league this year?
I would imagine no.
Yeah.
Ryan Tannehill has averaged 23 pass attempts in his last 8 games, and as 2-score road dogs projected by Vegas, it just seems not ideal to go in with that mindset. But that's what they're going to do. They're going to ride Henry as they have done the past 2 weeks especially. It's just that they are the number one red zone offense with Tannehill since he took over under center. And they still went 2 for 2 in the red zone against the Patriots last week. But the Patriots were number 10 red zone defense, whereas the Ravens, that's sort of their strength beyond the perimeter. The Ravens were the number 3 red zone defense.
Just to put numbers to that.
Yes.
I mean, Arthur Smith has been lights out in the red zone. The Titans have converted on 88% of their red zone drives leading to touchdowns, 23 of 26 since Tannehill took over as a starter. The league average is closer to 60%.
And I saw some chatter about Titans DC Dean Pease being familiar with the mobile quarterback, so I went back and looked it up, and everyone was citing the Super Bowl against Colin Kaepernick. I was like, okay, I'll go check that out because I don't remember the exact numbers. I guess he stopped him. Kaepernick averaged 10.7 yards per attempt and 8.8 yards per carry. So that's his familiarity with defending a mobile quarterback. With the worst corners this time, by the way.
Well, Lamar Jackson's a mobile quarterback, yes, but he's also the single best, the most effective and productive Russian quarterback of all time. I mean, look, the Titans have been better against the run than the pass this year, but we've really seen this all year. It doesn't matter. The Ravens have run through everybody. I think the Ravens are going to get their points. They're going to put up points they have all year. The question is, can the Titans do it? Because they're not going to be able to, I think, just hand the ball to Derrick Henry all game like they did last week. I mean, the main reason they were doing that, which I didn't really see the first time I watched the game, was the Patriots were pretty much daring them to run the ball. I mean, sitting with 2 high safeties on almost every snap. And to their credit, they gave up 14 points. I mean, I think they lost that game because of the offense, not necessarily their defensive performance. But it's going to be a different look this week. The Ravens blitz more than anybody by far. 55% of their snaps, they're setting a blitz. They're setting pressure. And when that happens, you need sound tackling. You need to make sure the one-on-one matchups, you get that guy to the ground if he catches the ball.
Right.
That's a scary proposition when those guys you got to get to the ground are A.J. Brown, Jonnu Smith, Derrick Henry. We're going to need Tannehill to play like that top 3 quarterback that statistically in the passing game he was when he was starting.
That's the key, right? Because last week we know that Jonnu Smith did absolutely nothing. He was barely involved. A.J. Brown was barely involved.
Everyone in the passing game was barely involved.
And, I mean, it's because Ryan Tannehill threw for 72 yards.
Yeah.
But both of those players that I mentioned are 2 of the best across the league in yards after the catch. We've talked about Derrick Henry being one of the best in yards after contact. All 3 are top 3 in their categories at their position. I think also for the Titans, to get into a narrative here, they really need to bank on basically 2 weeks off of the Ravens showing up in like a rusty format. Like just this offense looking rusty, the defense looking rusty, and not getting up to an early lead. Because I think this can be a situation because of how, if both teams don't hit big plays and they do rely on their running games, both teams might only have 7, 8, or 9 drives in the entire game. And that's a possibility. And so if we know the Titans scored on 2 of their 9 drives last week, the Ravens can do the same thing. But if they have like a Texans start, okay, where it doesn't click until the second half, and the Titans do, then it can be a drastic difference from how we have this perception and feeling of the Ravens right now.
I think the Mark Ingram injury, it sounds like they called him day-to-day, but apparently re-aggravated the issue.
And he didn't practice again on Wednesday.
Yeah, he's not 100%. This could be a little bigger, I think, than we're giving it credit for. I mean, I know the running backs don't matter compared to many other things on the team, but Gus Edwards, like, he's a pretty one-dimensional back, and the problem is they really don't trust Justice Hill to stay in on pass protection. So, I mean, Mark Ingram, he's been so great in blitz pickup all year, even receiving all year. I mean, they don't flow the passing game through a running back, but he's still been a very important part of this team, and I don't think we should just gloss over not having him.
I mean, I think we like underdogs a little bit, because we're trying to talk ourselves into possible ways the Titans can win, and they're a very good team.
I'm just assessing the game. I haven't made my pick.
Well, and I mean, I'm absolutely picking the Ravens.
I'm picking the Ravens.
Yeah, I'm 100% picking the Ravens.
10 points.
I think they roll as well.
Yeah.
I also think it's kind of easy just to talk about how good the Ravens can be, because they can be absolutely dominant. You know, they haven't faced that many injuries along either front this entire season. And Lamar Jackson, you know, doesn't force feed like one single player in the passing game. You also, if everything goes perfectly defensively, like it did last week against Tom Brady, right? You can create pressure. You know exactly how he's going to respond to those situations. The same cannot be said when you face off against someone like Lamar Jackson. When if all 11 players defensively do their job, you still can't account for the quarterback who can pick up a 17-yard gain out of absolutely nowhere.
Now, doesn't that same thing apply to Derrick Henry, though?
No. I would say no, because I don't even know how to describe this necessarily, but I think Derrick Henry is amazing. But he is definitely someone who is not going to change sides of the field, completely destroy angles. He's more someone who is a massive body that falls forward on 4 extra yards, but when he gets a full head of steam and your angle is off initially, he can take it to the house in that regard. I think they're very different playmakers.
To me, it's just, can you feed Derrick Henry whenever you're battling point for point with just a completely different offense than what they played last week? That's why I project A.J. Brown for an uptick in targets, basically because they had no choice but to get him more involved. But A.J. Brown played the lowest slot rate of any Titans receiver all year long. They're not going to move him to the slot to break him away from the perimeter, where Peters and Jimmy Smith have allowed just 55% of their targets since Peter was added to get caught. Yeah. It's going to come down, and he's talented enough to do this. That's why I kind of like him in DFS, because a lot of negativity is going to be, well, how many times is Tannehill going to throw? How many times can A.J. Brown get open? But given the high blitz rate, you would bet on A.J. Brown exploding on limited usage as he's done all year. I just still don't think it's going to be enough.
And we talked about how, you know, Jonnu Smith and A.J. Brown need to get more involved. I think it's arguable that this Ravens secondary is just as good as the Patriots was last week. You know, that this Ravens defense is just as good as the Patriots was last week.
I think their secondary is perfect for what they want to do. Because think about Marcus Peters. Like, when he was at his worst over his career, it's when he's trying to guard. He's jumping wrong routes and double moves right past him. Well, when you're blitzing so much that the quarterback has to get the ball out in 2 seconds, it helps to have a cornerback able to do that.
And it could easily happen again.
And while the Titans' offensive line played pretty well last week, especially Roger Saffold, who's had an up and down season during his first year in Tennessee, I could see Wink Martindale just giving him a nightmare day on Saturday as well, and throwing a whole bunch of stunts and twists and loops and everything at that Titans front and asking them to block that. Why don't we pick this game? Just quick 2 notes while you guys get your minds in order. The Marcus Peters trade in Week 7 really changed this team around, and a small storyline since we opened this conversation up today with coaching talk. With only one job being open, it certainly looks like the Ravens are going to be able to keep both coordinators heading into 2020.
Yeah, it's kind of a sneaky.
Which is an amazing accomplishment when you think about how good they were on both sides of the ball this year.
Also factor in, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, this is probably an off-season study, but just think about how many times players lose out in production because their coordinators, like the ones that put them in successful situations, move on. And the fact you're just going to bring the entire Ravens organization back for one more go, no matter what happens, that's pretty important.
Yeah.
All right, Ian, pick it.
I'm taking Titans plus 10. Wow. You know, I do think the Ravens.
Softy, you like the dogs.
Hey, you know, I think like I said, I think having those big playmakers can really take advantage of this Ravens blitz-happy scheme. Then also on the other side of the ball, I mean, there's a scenario, I think, where we could see this Ravens passing game get shut down. Adoree Jackson, one of the few guys that does have the speed to hang with Hollywood Brown if they choose to make that a featured matchup. And there's Kevin Byard. The Titans' defense is very strong up the middle, and that's, you know, we saw it with Daquan Jones and Jarrell Casey getting that consistent push. So if they can stay strong up the middle, Lamar Jackson's going to get his. He does against every defense in the league. But at the very least, I think they can keep it to within 1 score.
Even the Mark Ingram injury, I know Ian disagrees, but I really don't think it's that big of a deal. I like Gus Edwards a lot. 5.3 yards per carry on 133 carries this year. And then Justice Hill, Titans have obviously allowed third most receptions to running backs and allowed 10 to the Patriots last week. Maybe Justice Hill, actually not maybe, probably not. They don't get him too heavily involved, but he would attack from the backfield as a receiver. So I like the Ravens just to roll. I'll just lay the points again.
What's the updated spread this one, 10?
10, yes. I think it's still available at 9 or 9.5 in some places.
If I can find it at 9, I'll take the Ravens at 9, but 10's a little bit too much for me. Because I don't think it's a one-score game, but 10, I'm in that 9 window.
9 to 11 is like my window.
Yep.
So, yeah.
All right, let's move on to Sunday.
Cool.
Let's go to Sunday. Houston Texans go to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are back in our lives. This is a 50 total. I believe it's the highest total of the weekend. Chiefs right now favored by 9.5 points. This one kicks off at 3:05 Eastern on Sunday. Ian, these teams played each other in Week 6. Texans actually went on the road, yes, to Kansas City, won 31-24. But it's a little different, isn't it? Because this Chiefs team is healthier. It's gotten a lot better defensively. And in that game, the Chiefs were actually up 17-13, and yes, ended up losing 31-24.
Yeah, so the big factor in that game was just, like it is in every Houston win, Deshaun Watson just ended up kind of taking over. 10 carries, 42 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Was not sacked once, which is just incredibly surprising to see. But, we saw him, when they were down 16-0 last week. At some point, the Texans offense gets away from Carlos Hyde, and they pretty much just give the ball to Deshaun Watson, and he starts just making off-script plays because that's what he does, and he's Superman half the time. I don't know, though. The Texans, in terms of DVOA on offense and defense, if they make a run, they're going to be the worst team
to ever do it.
The only kind of comps I could find were the 2012 Ravens and 2007 Giants in terms of teams that, were able to overcome mediocre regular seasons to get there. J.J. Watt, obviously big emotional boost. You can't watch anyone else on the Texans make a play without ESPN cutting to that guy. But I just don't know if there's enough firepower throughout this team. There's Deshaun Watson, and everywhere else, I think the Chiefs are better.
That game, you didn't learn much from the Chiefs side because not only was that Tyreek Hill's first game back from injury, post-broken collarbone. He only played 51% of the snaps, despite finishing with 80 yards and a touchdown. They didn't have Chris Jones, who finished the year with 4 sacks in his last 5 games. They didn't have Sammy Watkins, which probably doesn't matter at all. And then they didn't have their starting left tackle and left guard. And Mahomes re-aggravated his ankle injury that he tweaked the week prior when he got stepped on in the first quarter. The Chiefs were the ghosts of themselves in that one game. What you learn from the Texans side, though, is that this is when the Chiefs' defense was still rolling. They finished the year as a top 7 defensive DVOA team, and Week 6 is when they were still just getting strong, and they were great. But Deshaun Watson still had his way. Will Fuller dropped, literally, not even hyperbole, 3 catches for 103 yards and 3 touchdowns. DeAndre Hopkins dropped a 12-yard touchdown over the middle of the field, and those are just outright drops that could have helped Watson propel him to a better day. And now the Chiefs are missing Juan Thornhill. We're not making picks yet, but I'm still on the side that the Chiefs will easily put up points now back at full strength. But I also think the Texans can put up points in this game. Especially if Fuller's healthy now. And that's the big question mark.
The Juan Thornhill injury is a massive one.
Yes.
And obviously he's a rookie from Virginia, just an uber athlete. And that's allowed them to get multiple in the back half, be diverse in the back half and allow Tyrann Mathieu to do basically whatever he wants. And it's interesting how they'll match up against players either in the slot or the outside or tight ends or whatever else. Now, how much they have to change defensively. And it's something we don't know because he got injured in Week 17. So there's really no type of tape that we can go back to and say, hey, this is how they're going to match up against the Texans.
I think they have they have the bodies to do that. Another guy that got injured in that game was Kendall Fuller.
Yep.
He's now back. He was their slot cornerback to start the season, and now they've kind of had Honey Badger there more frequently. But I do think they have enough depth, and they've been good enough on defense that I don't think that Houston's just going to march up and down the field because Juan Thornhill isn't there.
It's one of those things. We talked about with the Titans how they could do better this week than they did last week, just from a statistical standpoint. I think no matter what, Bill O'Brien is always going to be in the way of Deshaun Watson. And that's why they went down 16-0 last week, because those primary reads, it seems to be a repeating factor. It's not just a one-week issue. That was last week with Deshaun in this offense. We've seen it multiple times this year where the game plan, the script, just doesn't seem to be in the right place. And so it relies on Deshaun Watson being Superman. It relies on him to win outside of structure and put the team on his back. That is so tough to do. repeating itself 2 weeks in the regular season, and I think impossible to do 2 weeks repeating itself in the postseason, even if Will Fuller returns in this game. And right now, we don't know if that's a certainty. It sounds like he is, but who knows if he even finishes the game.
Yeah, and I believe the contrarian opinion, mine, is the one that they'll score. Like, it's probably projects better for them just not to score against this sneaky, great Chiefs defense. On the other side of the ball, though, Whitney Merciless and J.J. Watt did finish wild card weekend with the first and second most individual pressures, but it's a completely different scenario. Like, Buffalo's adjusted line yards on Football Outsiders for their offensive line was 23rd overall, whereas the Chiefs finished number 4. It is hard to reach Mahomes, especially when healthy. And so it's just a completely different matchup for their defense as well, their front seven in particular, all together, which is concerning.
Yeah, and you said before how he re-aggravated his foot injury or whatever in that first game, and scrambling is a very underrated part of Mahomes' game. And we know he scrambles to throw, but also just to run.
And he had 2 touchdowns before he re-aggravated his injury at the end of the first quarter.
Just balling. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, only Lamar Jackson and Tannehill average more yards per rush on scrambles than Mahomes this season. Like, he's a sneaky, very athletic dude, and you have that, you have his big playability, and then also this is all inside Andy Reid's scheme, which is just one of the most scheme-friendly things in the league. I mean, only Garoppolo, who we gush about Kyle Shanahan, the way he just sets up Jimmy G for all these easy throws, only Garoppolo averaged more yards after the catch per completion than Mahomes. I mean, they're going to need to not let Mahomes be Superman and take away just these easy passes to Mecole Hardman and Watkins and Tyreek Hill that, they're 10 yards downfield before you even know it.
We're deep into this conversation, and we haven't brought up this point, and I think it's because of who they're playing, the Texans, and not someone like the Titans, that the Chiefs' run defense is one of the worst in the NFL. Like, they've lost, I wouldn't say lost games because of it, but it's been a major factor in losses because of it. I don't know if it's going to show up this week. I don't think it will, but it's something to keep in mind moving forward.
Real quick, let's look at the best run defenses in the NFL. The Buccaneers,
but I'm not saying the best run defense means you're a good team, but an awful run defense can tank your team in a single game. It can. I'm hesitant to even call them that bad of a run. I think they focus way more on pass defense, which you should be doing in today's NFL. One more thought, and I know you don't agree with this one either, Ian, but, Patrick Mahomes isn't going to throw away a second half like Josh Allen did last week.
Right.
So
I agree with that thought.
If the Chiefs get up by 12, 14 points in a game, it's not going to allow the Texans to come back, even though they did it in week 6, but we know how different these rosters are right now. All right, let's move on, but before we do that, let's pick this game. Again, it's a 9.5, 10, whatever spread, wherever you find it. Total of 50 as well, which is super high. Daigle, where are you going?
We moved on quickly, and then I'll make my pick.
Okay.
The running back situation for the Chiefs, because that's important for DFS and fantasy.
Okay.
Just take your pick. Is it Damian or is it McCoy? Or is it timeshare?
It needs to be Damian.
I think it's timeshare.
It's not what it needs to be. That's the thing.
Andy Reid, when Shea was a healthy scratch back in week 10, Andy Reid said, he's not getting any younger, so it's important I manage him the right way as we go. He's going to be active. I mean, he's not going to be a healthy scratch.
He's definitely going to be active, but who leads in touches?
I think it's Damian still.
Okay.
Damian.
Okay. I'm of the belief they look better with Damian this past month.
Absolutely they do.
I think it's just going to be a true timeshare down the middle, though. And I know McCoy played 0 snaps in week 17, but again, they were leaning back some of their players as it was a must-win game, but not really. Like Chargers.
Reid's literally talked about managing his reps, so I agree with you.
I think it's a McCoy game. I think people are overestimating it. Having said that, quickly, because I know we're getting yelled at in the IFB.
Pick the game.
I know. The Chiefs by the points.
Chiefs roll.
I agree.
I am a narcissist on divisional round weekend. That's the reason I keep laying points. I've been down this road in the gambling street so many times. It's like we just forget how good these teams are when they come back from break. Having said that, we can go to the next one now because it's going to be a different story.
Yeah, I think we see first half Texans from last week much more than second half Texans of last week. All right, let's close out this weekend. Seattle travels to Green Bay. 4-point spread in this one, a total of 46. This is a 6:40 game on Sunday. Love these awkward time slots. Awkward is probably the right word for them. As we saw last week, Seattle, I wouldn't say it was a comeback win. I wouldn't say it was an underdog story last week. I mean, that was just an ugly performance. Yet Seattle has had plenty of ugly performances this season. Seahawks have now played in 13 one-score games this season. They are 11-2 in those games. The only team that has lost fewer of those games, Ian, the Green Bay Packers. Wow. They're 8-1 in one-score games this season. So which one of those teams is going to win this week?
I had someone on Twitter just reach out to me like, hey, so how about you calling the Packers frauds back in week 3 or whatever?
Week 3?
They are not frauds. But my concerns in the beginning of the
3.
season were that this offense looked very average and looked like they had a good pass rush, but I wasn't convinced they were going to become this top 10 unit that, we'd figured most Aaron Rodgers-led offenses would be. They had an awesome stretch from like week 3 to 10 or something like that. But really, we have not seen them take that next step forward as an offense. I mean, they finished the year 15th in scoring, 17th in yards per play. Rodgers, in QBR, just had the worst season of his career.
And I think, Ian, you're onto something here. And it's not just us 3 sitting at this desk. Even nationally, in the perspective that we get, are we giving enough respect to this Packers team? And have we given them enough respect all season long? Because they finished 13-3, right? We talk like them, like they are a 9-7 team who had to play on Wild Card Weekend. Mm-hmm. Should we respect this team more, Daigle?
I think they get the respect they've earned. Having said that, you would think it's a good matchup for them because they finished, I didn't even realize this till I looked, they finished in the number 4 rushing offense in DVOA, somehow, some way. Whereas Seattle's defense, we know they don't create pressure whatsoever, but also Seattle finished number 26 defensive DVOA in their front 7. So you would think that they use Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, assuming Jamal Williams is back healthy for this one.
You would think.
You would think to attack this front 7. But we also know the reason why Seattle is just always in close games, despite the fact they have Russell Wilson, a truly great quarterback, is because of the whole mentality of coaching, the mindset trickling down to your players. There was a reason why the Browns were sloppy under Freddie Kitchens and one of the top teams in penalties. There was a reason why Jason Garrett teams just grinded out wins despite being more talented than opposition. And there's a reason why the grinded out mentality, let's be great, of Pete Carroll every single day, put Seattle in one-score situations no matter what. So I still think it's a game. It's going to come down to the final play. It's super tough. Yeah, it's just super tough to assess. Even though Green Bay will have the advantage offensively, but Seattle probably has the advantage via their quarterback who can't be stopped under pressure, who can't be stopped against opposing pass rush. Like, it doesn't matter at all.
I think maybe the reason why we don't treat them like other 13-3 teams is we've seen them look like way worse than that. I mean, the Chargers beat down, the 49ers beat down. They didn't even clear 200 total yards.
And to your point, I mean, there have been a couple moments this season when the Packers' offensive line just got whooped. And they were sacked 5 times against the 49ers, 5 times against the Chiefs, 4 times against the Redskins, 3 times against the Chargers, 3 times against the Vikings. Sometimes it's on the offensive line. Sometimes it's on the quarterback holding the ball too long and wanting perfection down the field. I think, much like their defense, offensive line individual pieces are quite good, but sometimes it just doesn't gel along with the quarterback. I just don't know if Seattle is good enough defensively to do that. Clowney can have his moments. He can have 3 destructive plays per game when he blows everything up. But other than those 3, like Ezekiel Ansah's not going to do it, Poona Ford's not going to do it, Quentin Jefferson's not going to do it. They don't blitz that often. It's, at least my eyes tell me that. Maybe the numbers tell you differently. But it's just something right now where I don't truly believe in this Packers passing game other than Devontae Adams because they really have no names other than that. But if they get Aaron Jones involved at all, and if Aaron Jones gets, like, let's say, 70-plus receiving yards, the Packers are going to win this game. Because using him, like we talked about for stretches this season, like the Rams used Todd Gurley last year, and that's in Matt LaFleur's toolbox this season, then I think that's the difference maker in this game.
Aaron Jones played 4 games that Jamal Williams was either inactive or left early for. And in those games, he averaged 20 carries and 6 targets on 76% of their snaps. The other 12 games with Jamal Williams completely healthy for, he averaged 13 carries, 3.6 targets, and 55% of the snaps, which is unacceptable given his explosiveness. However, it is going to be their approach if Jamal Williams is healthy. That's not going to change. So it's slightly concerning, even though Jamal Williams was also effective sometimes whenever he was under center.
Yeah, and this is going to be a big game to pay attention to actives and actives. Daigle, I know you put out a really helpful injury piece on Fridays and Saturdays that kind of goes over this, but I think other than the Will Fuller injury, assuming those 49ers guys are coming back, like this game has the most actionable question marks because Packers side of the ball, their center, Corey Linsley's dealing with a back injury. Brian Bulaga, their right tackle, is concussed right now. Jamal Williams has his shoulder injury. And then on Seattle side of the ball, Dwayne Brown missed last week. Mikey Iupati missed last week. Now Ezekiel Ansah has a neck injury he's dealing with. I mean, losing 2 starting offensive linemen in round 2.
Possibly on both sides.
Exactly. So The biggest weakness in this entire game, though, is the Packers' run defense. And we're going to talk about bad run defenses.
But isn't that the question, though? Because even if they are bad, is the Seattle rush offense good enough right now to even maximize that?
That's a good question, but I just want to – this is how bad they were. The only team with allowed more adjusted line yards per rush than the Packers was the Dolphins. Brutal.
But we haven't seen Marshawn Lynch look anything like he can maximize anything.
2.27 yards per carry.
Inside the 5-yard line.
And they said they were going to give him more touches since Travis Homer's outsnapped him 91-41 the past 2 weeks.
Right.
Travis Homer, I know he had a letdown last week as they both did against the Eagles. It's impossible to run against the Eagles. But Travis Homer in week 17 was bar none the more explosive player. So to scale him back is worrisome.
Yeah, 17 carries last week for 19 yards,
Yeah.
combining between the two. Russell Wilson was obviously the team's leading rusher. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, if Chris Carson was in this game, maybe I feel better about the Seahawks, even what we saw from DK Metcalf last week. I don't know if DK Metcalf can do that in back-to-back weeks. And I've talked about it a lot this season. Like, this Packers defense has also been up and down. It's been a roller coaster for them. But the individual pieces are there. I mean, some people are talking about Zadarius Smith as the Defensive Player of the Year. Preston Smith is hovering around, I believe, 10 sacks on the season. Kenny Clark up the middle is quite good. The outside pieces, Jair Alexander, Adrian Amos, like, these are really talented individual pieces, but they do give up big plays. Yeah. And we saw Seattle, Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf get vertical and win down the field. So it's limiting that factor is a meaningful part for the Packers team to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I wanted for sure hit was Zadarius Smith. I mean, league leader in pressures this season. We saw Daniil Hunter, Clowney, Cameron Jordan for little stretches last week just really make big plays. And I think that's for the Packers to win. Like, they're going to need that pass rush to just play like a bunch of superstars.
And we've seen Seattle always ignores their offensive line. That's why trust me, Zadarius Smith, in my opinion, is the best defender for either side on the field in this game.
Yeah.
But I don't think it matters against Russ at all. Like, how often has he played against pressure? Every single game, every single year since he signed the big contract. He finished with the 9th highest completion rate under pressure among all starters. It's not about pressure. It's about how they use him offensively, and that's something we don't know how it's going to go.
Let's take it home, Daigle. Start the picks off for us.
It is Seattle. For me.
It's Seattle.
Yeah,
and
points. Points.
Just points.
It's the points, yeah. Not that they'll win. I think it's Seattle points.
I want to take the money line so bad, but no, I'm going points as well. There's just, we talked about Seattle, they're always just battling their coaching. Is Russell Wilson trying to overcome Schottenheimer, trying to get in a situation where he can go win them the games? I don't trust really the coaching enough to go with Seattle money line. But Packers, I don't think they're 3.5 points better.
Here's your sneaky player of the week. I bet you hear Tyler Ervin's name a handful of times this weekend.
I think
he's the running back for the Packers.
I think he might not touch the field.
Why would you?
I think
know who he is.
I think that they are going to use him in motions, line him up in the backfield, get him out as a receiver in some situations. This is just a guess, guys. This is just a guess from watching some of these games.
I would take the under on 9.5 total yards for Ervin.
I'm not going to say he's going to get yards.
Under 9 snaps.
I'm going to say, okay, he's going to see more than 9 snaps. That's my prediction. 10 snaps.
Dexter Williams could outplay him.
No. It's a sneaky. It's
fun.
Going on a limb here. I'm having some fun here, Ian. Have some fun for once in your life.
Because you don't say this without knowing something.
I'm not sure if I'm saying anything. I'm just hinting
Madison,
that
Wisconsin.
Maybe we might see a little bit of Tyler Ervin in this game. Just as a little fun, nice little wrinkle that the team's had a little time to think about since they had a bye week. Get those linebackers and KJ Wright, everyone else in a bind at the second level. No? Okay.
No.
Let's utilize a running back not named Aaron Jones in the passing game.
We'll find out who's right. All right, that does it for us. We will be back. Well, I will be back on Monday. These guys will be in Las Vegas. Yes, going without me.
We have a conference.
Having some fun. While little old me sits here in 30 degrees Stamford, Connecticut.
Because Rotoworld was nominated because of the people for Rotoworld Live show, this podcast they're listening to. So some of us are going to help accept awards.
And?
Oh, yeah, and then supposedly we have host of the year as well, under individual
Go
nomination.
support Josh. You know he keeps us together. He's the real hero here.
If you guys want to tweet at the FSGA, go find that tweet of host of the year and just say Josh is a good guy. That works too.
Also, we're going to get yelled at for this, but I need just a minute really quick. On Monday, I don't know if either of you are working the feed. This is actually very important to me. We saw come up from Dallas News and reporters and announcers all over that someone named Mike Reiner, the old gray wolf on Twitter, is what his handle is, actually stepped away. And we all got to where we are now via different paths. Who knows what we wanted to do? But growing up, for me, it was chef, and then it was guy who travels and just works in hostels with hair and abs, who then just takes that cleaning towels and then stays in those hostels around the world for free. Obviously, you need hair and abs to do that. I can't do that. But eventually, for me, it was always after that, writing and radio more importantly. We've talked about radio before. And the ticket is something, it's so hard to explain to people. It's Dallas Radio. It's the first ever Dallas radio sports station. And that's kind of how and why I ended up where I am today. And the man who was on Afternoon Drive for 21 years retired. And it was something that happened Monday afternoon, which is why I wasn't sure if you saw, because Aikman mentioned it, Jane Slater mentioned it, so many other people discussed it. It led Dallas Morning News the next morning. It was a very big deal. Like, it impacted me greatly. And so I am just little old John Daigle in Stamford, Connecticut on a fantasy football podcast now. But Mike Reiner, who may not even hear this, doesn't realize that he actually spoke to, when he was creating a radio station, the vision actually started an entire generation of people around the world and around America, like my age, who are doing this now. Not fantasy football in particular, but are doing this, announcing football, announcing other sports, writing in newspapers all over because of his vision. So I just wanted to quickly say thank you, and the vision is not lost wherever you are.
We will close it there. Go and subscribe to the show, as you most likely are. And we'll be back on Monday with a little review pod, get these guys on the phone, maybe talk to one other person as well. We'll find out soon. We'll plan it ahead. Enjoy your weekend, everyone. For John, for Ian, I am Josh. Talk to you soon. See ya.